Hey door rollers, welcome back to the channel. So yesterday, the IRS released the new retirement account contribution limits, think 401k and IRAs for 2024, along with the income limits when it comes to contributing to a Roth IRA or deducting contributions to a traditional IRA. So in today's video, I'm going to show you those limits, what they're going to in 2024, and then I thought it'd be fun to then show you just how rich you could be if you maxed out either IRA contributions or 401k contributions or both throughout your working years. The numbers are astounding, as they often are with compounding. All right, let's dive into it. By the way, I'm going to show you two articles where I've got all this data, including how rich you can get if you max out retirement accounts. I'll leave links to both of them below the video. So let's start with the limits. So this is, again, is all from IRS, and I've got links to the IRS pages in this article, so you can check it all out. Let's just start with basic retirement accounts. So we're here for 401ks, and that includes 403bs, you government workers and military members of the military. Thank you for your service, TSP. Most 457 plans, which are funky state plans that I've never had, but apparently some of you do. And this includes Roth versions. So the limit's going from $22,500 to $23,000 in 2024. So a $500 increase. Just keep in mind, these do get a cost of living adjustment every year, but they use some rounding. So, they always go up in increments of 500. So in some years they don't go up, even with a little bit of inflation. In any event, workplace retirement accounts, most of them going to $23,000. The catch-up contribution for 401ks and others here is also subject to cost of living increases, but it's not going up this year. So it's still at $7,500. And that gets us, if you're 50 or older, those catch-up contributions only apply to old folk like me. If you're 50 or older, that brings your total potential contribution. That's a lot of money, $30,500. All right, for IRAs, including Roths, going from $6,500 up to $7,000. Now, an interesting side note, by the way, you notice this has a footnote here? Let me show you that. I just added those. It's pretty neat. Anyway, I don't know. I find these things fascinating, footnotes. Here's the interesting thing. What that footnote tells you is that before what's called the Secure Act 2.0, the catch-up contribution for those 50 or older on an IRA or Roth IRA was not subject to cost of living adjustment, so it was always $1,000. Thanks to the Secure 2.0 Act of last year, it now is adjusted for inflation. However, as I mentioned, there's that rounding rule. It's going to go up in increments of 500, and inflation wasn't enough to get it up high enough so that the rounding took it to 1,500. All of which is to say, the catch-up contribution on IRAs and Roth IRAs is subject to inflation, but as it turns out, applying that rule doesn't change it for 2024. I would be really surprised if it doesn't go up in 2025, but there you go. So again, that brings max contributions for those 50 and older up to $8,000. And then I also included here, some of you might have what's called a simple retirement account. It's an account that some small businesses use, and the contribution limits are different, but they are going up from $15,500 up to $16,000. The catch-up contribution, again, 50 or older, staying at $3,500. So those are the limits for sort of workplace retirement accounts. Now, what about IRAs? Well, same page here. Let's first look at these are income limits. So we've got our IRA contribution limits up here, but these are income limits, and there's two that we need to focus on. The first is whether you can deduct in your taxes traditional IRA contributions. So here's the deal. If you're single and you don't have a workplace retirement account available to you, or you're married and neither you nor your spouse have a workplace retirement contribution or plan as an option, you can deduct your IRA contributions, right? There's no income limits to deducting IRA contributions if you're married, your spouse don't have a workplace retirement account. But what if you do? What if you're single or married, either you do, or if you're married, your spouse does? Well, here's the deal. If you're single and you have a workplace retirement account, doesn't matter whether you contribute to it or not. It's just, is it available to you to contribute? You have this phase out range. And so the amount of an IRA contribution that you can deduct begins to phase out in this year, 2023, it's $73,000. And if your income goes to $83,000, it's totally phased out. You cannot make an IRA. You can make an IRA contribution. You can't deduct that on your taxes. That range is increasing in 2024 to $77,000 to $87,000. Now, this row is if you're married filing jointly and the spouse that's making the IRA contribution is covered by a workplace retirement account. You can see the income ranges are going from here up to as high as 143. And then the ranges are higher if you're married, filing jointly, and the spouse making the IRA contribution is not covered, which would mean the other spouse is. You can see the ranges here, they're going up. Obviously, they're a lot more significant, a lot higher in this context than if the spouse who's making the contribution is covered by a workplace retirement account. I hope this is making sense. I know it does seem a little confusing. All right, let's get back to it. If you're married filing separately and the spouse making the IRA contribution is covered by a workplace retirement plan, you can see two things. The phase out is really, really low. Again, this is filing separately, and it didn't change. And the reason it doesn't change is because this limit, unlike the others up here, is not subject to a cost of living adjustment. I bet you didn't know that. Well, maybe you did. I didn't until I did the research. All right. Now let's get to Roths. So with a Roth, again, you can make too much money and disqualify yourself from contributing to a Roth IRA. Now keep in mind, this is not about a backdoor Roth IRA, right? Where you put money into a traditional IRA and then immediately convert it to a Roth. That's not what this is about. This is making direct contributions right into a Roth IRA. And there are phase outs. And so if you're single or head of household, you can see, it's was 138 to 153. That's going up to 146, up to 161. And what that range means is once you hit that bottom number, as your income starts to grow above, in this case, let's say 146,000 for 2024, you can still contribute to a Roth IRA, but your contribution limit starts to go down, and it continues to go down as your income goes up. And once you get to more than 161,000, it's zero. All right. If you're married filing jointly, you get a higher phase out, 230 to 240. And again, filing separately, it's that same pesky 0 to 10 grand that ain't indexed for inflation. And then the last thing I'll mention here is the Savers Credit, which is an absolutely wonderful credit it's designed for folks that maybe don't make as much. It's actually called the Retirement Savings Contributions Credit, but people just call it the Savers Credit. And you can see the limits here, single and married filing separately, 36,500. It's going up to 38,250. If you're married filing jointly, you can go all the way up to 76,500 in 2024. And head of household is a little lower, but a very important credit that not a lot of folks know about. And if you're using tax software like a TurboTax or something, it's going to walk you through the questions. And I've helped people with their taxes who've had the benefit of Savers Credit, and it's a credit. It's it can be up to 50% of your contribution, so really significant. I've got a few other things down here that you can check out. Again, I'll leave a link below the video. Things about qualifying longevity annuity contracts and charitable distributions from an IRA. Really important stuff for some of you, so you can check that out in the article. I'll link to it below the video. All right, now let's see how rich can we be. The numbers. You're not going to believe the numbers. I double check. I use a calculator, to come up with these numbers, and they were fairly simple, I think, reasonable assumptions. The numbers get crazy big. Here's what I did. I started off with assuming we're going to max out a 401k, and I only assumed a 5% rate of growth. And I'll show you which calculator. I used this calculator, which you'll find a link to it in the article. And I assumed no catch-up contribution, so I ignored that. So just $23,000 a year. Well, I say just, it's a lot of money, but there you go. And I didn't assume any increases. I mean, we know that limit's going to go up over time, cost of living adjustments, but I just assumed it stays at $23,000. And look at the numbers. After 10 years, you have 300 grand. After 20, you have 8. 30 years, 1.6, 40 years. So let's say you start at 20 and you work till 60, or it's 25 to 65. You got $3 million. Now you'd say, well, there's inflation. Yeah, but remember, we're only assuming a 5% rate of return. In fact, let me just show you this. If we assume 0 for a minute and we put in 23,000 a year, and we were looking at what? We were looking at the 40 year. So we'll put 40 years in here. Let's assume 10%. I mean, that's what stocks have returned historically. $11 million. I mean, the numbers get silly big. They really do. And even if we came off of that and said, well, maybe 8%, we're still at 6 million. So yeah, I'm assuming 5%. So one could almost see that as maybe an after inflation rate of return. But of course, as you know, there are no guarantees. And after 50 years, you got over $5 million. Now, the thing to note, notice after 40 years, from 40 to 50, it jumps from just under 3 million to over 5 million. That's just what happens later in the compounding process. Every year you add on after this kind of compounding makes a huge, huge difference. All right, so some of you might be saying, that's great, Rob, but I ain't got 23 grand to save every year. Well, what about maxing out your IRA? This is 7 grand, still a lot of money. 92,000 after 10 years, 243 after 20, and go all the way up. Look at this, $1.5 million. Again, and that's assuming a 5% rate of return. Big numbers. And if we max them both out, that's really a lot of money. Look at this. We start at 396 after 10 years, but if we jump all the way to 50 years, you're at $6.5 million. That's a lot of money. Really what this shows us is the power of compounding, which we talk a lot about on this channel. And the goal in investing is just to get out of the way. Don't ever get into the way of compounding. Just save your money, invest it wisely, simply. Low-cost index funds are my favorites. Take advantage of tax advantage accounts like IRAs and 401ks, and then just leave it alone. Get out of the way. Let it do its thing. There'll be some bad years. There'll be some ugly, scary years. And during those times, it's best to just go outside and throw the frisbee or play golf or fish or crafting, whatever it is you do, and ignore it. And just let the compounding do its thing. Well, there you go. 401k, IRA contribution limits, income limits, and just how rich you can get if you max out these types of accounts. Hey, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. As I said, I'll leave links to both of these articles below the video. And until next time, remember, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.